Real emo only consists of the DC emotional hardcore scene and the late 90s screamo scene. What's known as Midwest emo is only... We're not doing that. Let's talk about Revolution Summer instead. 1985 was not just a year of Live Aid, Aquanet hairspray, and skiing off of bathroom countertops, but rather in mildewed garages and sticky dive bars was formed the genesis of a new vision of hardcore that would spread across the entire nation. We start off in 1983 with the breakup of DC hardcore titans The Faith and Minor Threat. This was largely due to creative differences and the fact that keeping a hardcore band together longer than 5 years is about as likely as the venues not smelling like fermented piss. At the time, the scene started to face somewhat of a loss in identity due to expansion from its once more private and intimate atmosphere, as well as many members of the scene either leaving off for college or just falling out of the lifestyle.
When all was said and done, I was nothing more than a goddamn trendy-ass poser.
With this expansion came a general wave of macho hardcore, complete with increased use of cliches, a general lack of political and emotional nuance within the music, and particularly now what we would label as crowd killing became a pretty large issue within the scene. Yes, this debate has been going on for a full 40 years. Discourse never changes in the alternative scene. Crowd killing was a hot-button topic of debate within the scene due to a variety of factors, namely a combination of association with general violence on the scene, primarily against women, the rise in right-wing bad actors in the scene, such as Boneheads, which were due largely to the political apathy found within the scene, and vandalism, which started causing various venues either to become hostile to the hardcore scene or outright close. Eventually, these tensions within the scene caused a split between the more macho side of the hardcore scene and those desiring a more peaceful scene, largely made up of members of Dischord Records such as Ian MacKaye, Amy Pickering, Guy Picciotto, and more. The actual name Revolution Summer was coined by Amy Pickering, who was a member of Fire Party, a proto-Riot Grrrl band. Rites of Spring ended up forming in 1983, comprised of members of Insurrection, including Guy Picciotto, and Ed Janey of The Faith. But within their first couple of shows in 1984, they had garnered the attention of a number of notable members within the scene. They came prepared with this new sound, brashy, melodic, and intimate, with introspective lyricism paired with wild performances and elaborate stage setups that would eventually end up smashed by the end of the show, which was largely a divergence from the machismo found in the scene at the time. On June 14, 1985, Rites of Spring played what would be the show to kick off Revolution Summer, where they would announce the introduction of the punk percussion protests found in Washington, D.C. These percussion protests centered around South African apartheid, which is a topic that is way too complex and nuanced for me to cover here as an aside. Regardless, the anti-apartheid protesters were disallowed from setting up protest sites within a block and a half of the South African embassy within Washington, D.C. So, to make sure their voices were heard, they brought basically anything you could make noise with and hammered away. This form of protest became a mainstay within the D.C. hardcore scene, with even Bush Jr. saying the drums were keeping him up at night, as opposed to the blown-up children who he slept soundly through. The influence of these protests on the scene cannot be understated. Involving everybody in direct political action had profound influence on the morals and ethics of the scene going forward. At the same time, various other Revolution Summer-based bands would begin to form as well, such as Embrace, made up of members of Minor Threat and The Faith, Beefeater, Dag Nasty, made up of members of Minor Threat and Bloody Mannequin Orchestra, King Face, Lunch Meat, Grey Matter, and various new hardcore acts, each of which were taking on new avant-garde influences. As is standard in hardcore, the majority of these bands did not see life beyond the end of the summer. In the wake of this summer, the hardcore scene saw a new sense of awoken political consciousness. With regular protests and political activism, the scene began to see a more hardline stance of ethics and a general revitalization of the scene itself, with 1986 seeing numerous bands arise from the ashes of the bands from the summer before. Following the new style and sound which began to arise during the summer, we saw the first wave of post-hardcore bands that would shape the course by which emo would take forever, including acts such as Fugazi, Swizz, One Last Wish, Moss Icon, and more, which eventually led into the massive landscape of sound and genres we see across emo today. This was my first time ever scripting out a video. If you guys would like to see more in the future, please let me know.